My wife has been doing something surreptitious for years, part 1. Hi there, welcome to Reddit Goat channel. Today we are going to have another unbelievable cheating story. But before we get started, please hit the subscribe button and click the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our daily cheating stories. I, 35M, think that my wife, 33F, is cheating on me, and has been for many years. We've been together for 14 years, we've been married for almost 10 years, and we have a 5-year-old daughter together. When my wife and I were in college, where we first started dating, we had an incident where she had some really sexually graphic texts from a guy we both knew from school. She even had classes with him. I confronted her about the texts. I definitely didn't handle it well, and basically accused her straight out of the gate of cheating on me without realizing there were some possible outcomes for her. One of those outs was that she claimed that they were just some pervy texts that she got from this guy out of the blue, and that if I had paid any attention when I was snooping through her phone, she hadn't actually responded to them. At the time, I conceded that I may have overlooked that possibility, and I had overreacted. She apologized to me for not mentioning to me that some guy was hitting on her like that, and I apologized for overreacting and for snooping. We moved on from there. Fast forward to this last year. My daughter, wife, and I are at the gas station. I can tell my wife is kind of distant and detached from the interactions my daughter and I are having. I notice she's glued to her phone as well. The gas fill for our car is on the passenger side, and I have the rear passenger door open so I can tickle my daughter while I wait for the car to fill up. I'm really suspicious of what my wife is doing at this point, so I decide that I'm going to take a look over my wife's shoulder from the back seat at what it is she's so caught up in. Turns out she is actively in the moment sexting some guy. Like, word/description/acts that very much seem like they've been doing this a while, texting, and looking back with 20/20 hindsight, I'm fairly certain they have been fucking as well. Also, all the shit she was texting was super graphic shit, stuff that she never used with me either in dirty talk or when we got intimate, and I know this next admission is pathetic and that it shouldn't matter more than anything else, but that fact that she wanted to share in these acts with this man instead of me really fucking hurt. Probably just my pride talking, but it is what it is. So, fast forward 10 minutes when we get home, and I have to suffer through smiling during dinner and the whole nighttime ritual of getting our daughter to bed so as not to cause a scene by blowing up at my wife for what I had seen her texting. Honestly, that was probably a blessing, because it allowed me to collect my thoughts before confronting her. I end up telling my wife what I saw at the gas station, and right off the bat she tries to play dumb. What are you talking about? Honey, you're making no sense. I told her to not play dumb with me, and I recited some of the texts that I could remember back to her to prove that I saw what I saw. She then goes on to admit that it was a mistake, but that it was 100% nothing physical, and that she was really sorry. She admitted that the guy was a work colleague. We talked a lot that night about why she felt she needed to be doing that. A lot of it boiled down to her feeling depressed and lonely. We talked about strategies that we could invoke at home, things that we both could change, to help mend the rift. I guess things felt kind of okay after that. But it felt like that damage to our trust was already done, and I don't think I've ever really recovered. Even that seemingly small moment of infidelity, assuming that was only texts, was just such a fucking hammer to my heart. Ever since that incident from last year, I've been waking up every day as a lesser version of myself. My emotions and propensity to feel anything have been severely muted. Interacting with my daughter is about the only thing that gets me back close to a baseline of how I remember my former self. But beyond those precious moments, I'm just a walking, grayed out zombie that puts on a good face for pretty much everything for my day-to-day, going to work, interacting with my wife, etc. Now fast forward to yesterday. My wife has gone on a week-long work trip to the East Coast, we are West Coast. I actually had zero suspicions or justifiable reasons to be worried for this trip, because things had been going pretty well between us, and she hadn't really given off any indicators of suspicious behavior. But, my first clue was that when she arrived at her destination, she couldn't get the Wi-Fi working for FaceTime. And this stayed true for the entirety of her trip. First of all, FaceTime works on cellular data just fine, which we have a ridiculous amount of. I explained that to her, without much of a response. Second, I know that if I were gone for a week from my family, it would be my biggest fucking priority to get FaceTime up and running so that I could see my family's faces every time I called to visit, which would be every single night, which brings me to the next point. She called us in the evening to say goodnight maybe 2 times out of the 7 days that she was gone. Based on previous trips she's had, this was really strange. Normally she is like clockwork, touching in with us to share her day and to hear from us about our day, and, again, always on FaceTime. I asked her about that, and she claimed that she was just too tired in the evenings to get back to us. Also, in the past, if she was away from me/home, she would always text me good night and that she loved me, even if we had previously chatted moments earlier on FaceTime or via phone call. For this recent trip, she never texted me once. So, when she got back, my radar was on high alert. Now, I don't feel good about this next part, but when she went to sleep that night, I checked her travel bag to see if my suspicions were correct. Sure enough, to my surprise, she keeps this little red book as a diary in her work bag. I open it up, and there is a date marked February 9, 2015. Turns out she'd started writing a poem on that day about our daughter, who had just been born the previous fall. Okay, that's really sweet. I say to myself, and I start to feel bad about my snooping. Flip to the next page, and there's a new entry. There's no date, but it's written sequentially right after the aforementioned poem, so I know that what I describe here was an entry that came after our daughter was born. This non-dated entry starts off with her describing how much she longs for this specific person, doesn't give his name. She goes on to talk about how she can't stop thinking about him. Every man she sees reminds her of him. She talks about how she never really intended for things to go very far, but that one night that started in the bar, and ended up going upstairs just felt too right to not be something meaningful. She goes on to say that she doesn't feel bad about making that decision in regard to how it impacts her other life. She describes how she thinks maybe her other life was the mistake. This goes on for pages. That entry ends with her making peace with herself that he moved on from her, and it was time for her to forget about him. I am assuming that her other life is our daughter and me. There was only one more entry after that previous one. I took pictures of it and have typed it out here in its entirety. I'm laughing to myself because I haven't opened this book in over 2 years, and here I am sitting in his bed. In his room at his home. Still feeling angst over so many of the same things. I'll go home after having a week with him and I'll be asking the same questions. Is he ever going to call again after? Was it so stupid to go on this trip? So funny how I thought we'd never speak again, and look where I am. We worked together, we talked almost every day, and he was there for me as a friend. Now here I am. And back with questions. Why were we so hot and cold those first couple of days and then just tapered off? Maybe he's doing that moral compass wrestling, and after I leave we'll never speak again. This trip was probably a bad idea. But we had a lot of fun. And he did say he'd been looking forward to it. He missed me, he wanted this, I know that. I wish he would just tell me he wants me, just me, and always me. It's like we dance around things because he still wants us to have this thing happening despite the rest of my life, and I just don't want to talk about that, to the point that I'm lying, and I hate lying to him. But meanwhile, every tender moment I have with him is so precious I can't believe it. I couldn't imagine we'd actually be snuggling on the couch, and there we were. I haven't slept since reading that last full entry. I haven't confronted her yet, either. It's been almost 48 hours now without sleep, and I'm just an emotional wreck. I just don't know how to handle this situation. I guess I've gotten so good at wearing this zombie mask ever since incident number 2 happened, that I've been able to limp through the last couple of days, but it's getting really hard to be around her. I hopped online and read some guides on how to deal with infidelity, and most of the guides mention therapy. So I'm going to look into that tomorrow. There are more to come. Find out the update of this story, check our channel or the description. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell for any future cheating stories.